The Age of Discovery was a time of great adventure and risk, a time when explorers set sail into the unknown, searching for new lands, new resources, and new opportunities. It was an era that forever changed the world, and at the heart of this journey stood a group of brave men who ventured into the vast, unexplored oceans. These men were pioneers, and their daring expeditions laid the foundation for the world we know today. At the forefront of these voyages was Richard Hakluyt, a scholar and visionary who believed in the power of exploration to shape England's future. His vision was not only about expanding the empire, but about creating a nation that would thrive not just through its armies, but through its knowledge, its trade, and its bold, daring explorers. Hakluyt understood that the key to England's greatness lay not just in the lands it controlled, but in the open seas, the vast, uncharted waters that beckon with promise. It was in 1589 that Hakluyt compiled his epic work, the principal navigations, voyages, traffics, and discoveries of the English nation. This legendary collection of stories would go on to document the incredible journeys of the English explorers, sailors, and merchants who ventured across the world. It was not just a book about maps and trade routes. It was a thrilling account of the lives of these daring men, their triumphs and their failures, their victories and their struggles. It was a story of ambition, courage, and survival. The late 1500s were a time of immense change and opportunity. England, under the rule of Queen Elizabeth I, was emerging as a global power. The country's ships sailed across the world, and its people had a growing thirst for discovery. There was talk of treasures waiting to be found in distant lands, spices from the East, precious metals from the Americas, and untold riches in the unexplored parts of the world. The seas were seen as the key to England's future, and the men who braved the unknown were viewed as heroes. Hakluyt's work painted a vivid picture of these men. These brave souls who set out into the ocean, sometimes never to return. The promise of adventure was enticing, but the dangers were real. The seas were unpredictable, and many ships never made it back home. There were storms, rough waters, and encounters with hostile forces. Yet, the explorers pressed on, driven by a desire for discovery, wealth, and glory. The first section of Hakluyt's book focuses on the voyages to the north. The search for the Northwest Passage, a fabled route to Asia, was one of the most important missions of the time. The hope was that by finding this route, England could secure a trade route to the riches of the East, bypassing the dangerous waters controlled by the Spanish and Portuguese. This passage would not only change the course of England's history, but would also establish the country as a global maritime power. Sir Martin Frobisher, one of the prominent figures in Hakluyt's narrative, embarked on one of the earliest and most dangerous voyages in search of the Northwest Passage. Frobisher was an experienced sailor, and he led his crew into the icy waters of the Arctic. The conditions were harsh, and the journey was fraught with danger. The men faced freezing temperatures, fierce storms, and the constant threat of icebergs and rocky coastlines. Yet, Frobisher and his crew pressed on, determined to find a shortcut. In his account, Hakluyt captures the relentless nature of these voyages, the cold, the isolation, and the sense of urgency that drove these men to push beyond the limits of what was known. The Arctic waters were unforgiving, and Frobisher's expedition faced numerous setbacks. There were moments of despair when the crew believed they would never return home. Yet, through all the challenges, there was an undeniable sense of ambition that kept them going. Frobisher's journey was not successful in finding the Northwest Passage, but it was not in vain. It brought back valuable knowledge about the Arctic region and opened up future opportunities for further exploration. Hakluyt's telling of this voyage highlights not only the hardships faced by Frobisher and his men, but also the spirit of perseverance and determination that defined the explorers of the time. The pursuit of the Northwest Passage was not just about geography. It was about a larger vision of England's place in the world. The men who set sail on these expeditions were not just sailors. They were visionaries who saw beyond the horizon, imagining a future where England would dominate global trade and exploration. For them, the seas were a way to expand England's influence and wealth, and they were willing to risk everything to achieve this goal. England's exploration efforts during this time were not limited to the north. The seas were open, and there were many other regions to explore: Africa, the Americas, and beyond. These voyages were fueled by the same ambition that drove Frobisher and others to seek out the Northwest Passage. England's sailors were not only looking for new trade routes, they were also seeking new territories to claim, new resources to exploit, and new peoples to trade with. Hackett's book covers these voyages in great detail, providing vivid accounts of the challenges faced by these explorers. From encounters with hostile natives to dangerous storms, these men experienced it all. Yet, despite the hardships, the English nation continued to expand its reach across the globe. Hackett's stories are filled with moments of triumph and tragedy, highlighting the risks these men took and the rewards they reaped. One of the most famous figures in Hackett's work is Sir Francis Drake. Drake's journey around the world, which included fighting off Spanish ships, discovering new lands, and returning to England a hero, is one of the most thrilling tales of the time. Hackett captures the excitement and danger of Drake's voyage, focusing on the battles at sea and the treasures he brought back. Drake's successful circumnavigation of the globe helped cement England's place as a maritime power, and his story remains one of the most celebrated of the Age of Discovery. Through Hackett's words, we begin to understand the deep connections between exploration, trade, and national power. The men who sailed the seas in the 1500s were not just adventurers. They were part of a larger movement that would shape the future of England. Their voyages were about more than just discovering new lands. They were about expanding England's influence and securing its place in the world. In the pages of Hackett's book, we can hear the sound of the crashing waves, feel the salt spray in the air, and almost experience the tension of these epic voyages. The stories he tells are not just about the ships and the men. They are about the spirit of adventure that drove them to push the boundaries of what was known. This was an age of discovery, an age of exploration, and an age of unimaginable possibility. Through Hackett's account, we are transported back to a time when the world was still largely unexplored, and the seas were seen as a vast, mysterious frontier. The men who sailed these waters were not just explorers. They were pioneers who laid the groundwork for the world we live in today. Their stories are a testament to the power of human ambition, courage, and the desire to know what lies beyond the horizon. The journey of these explorers, as told by Richard Hackett, is a reminder that the world is full of unknowns waiting to be discovered. The age of discovery may have passed, but the spirit of exploration and adventure that drove these men still lives on. And as long as there are new horizons to reach, the legacy of these brave explorers will continue to inspire generations to come. As we continue our journey through the age of discovery, we move beyond the icy waters of the north and into the far-reaching corners of the world, where England's explorers ventured. The world was vast, full of danger, promise, and opportunity, and England's sailors were some of the bravest men to navigate it. In this section, we will dive deeper into the daring voyages that shaped England's rise as a global maritime power, focusing on those who ventured far beyond the known world. While the search for the Northwest Passage in the north was one of the earliest and most significant efforts, England's explorers did not limit their ambitions to icy waters. The realm of trade, new territories, and riches from the east beckoned, and the men who dared to reach these faraway lands became heroes in their own right. From Africa to the Americas, these men faced not only treacherous seas, but also unfamiliar peoples, foreign diseases, and extreme environmental conditions. One of the key figures in Hackett's narrative is Sir Francis Drake, whose bold voyages captured the imagination of the English people. Drake was not only known for his daring raids against Spanish ships, but also for his monumental journey around the world. His circumnavigation of the globe was not just a remarkable feat of navigation, but also an important moment in the history of England's naval power. Drake's journey is a symbol of the ambition that fueled the Age of Discovery. The idea that no distance was too far, no obstacle too great to overcome. Drake's journey around the world was filled with both peril and triumph. The seas were unpredictable, and the ships faced numerous threats along the way, from hostile ships to uncharted territories. But through it all, Drake and his men pressed on, driven by the hope of wealth and glory. In Hackett's account, we see how the expedition battled through storms, fought off Spanish ships, and explored new lands that had never been mapped before. Along the way, they made remarkable discoveries, including new ports for trade and valuable resources that would benefit England for years to come. The most significant part of Drake's journey was a successful circumnavigation, which took him across the Pacific Ocean and into the waters of the Americas. It was a journey of discovery that helped establish England's presence on the global stage. Drake's voyage was not just about finding new lands. It was about asserting England's power on the seas and challenging the dominance of Spain, which at the time controlled vast territories in the New World. In his detailed account, Hackett highlights the difficulties that Drake faced during his circumnavigation, from the threat of hostile forces to the harsh conditions of the unknown seas. Every moment of the journey was filled with tension. Yet, through sheer determination and skill, Drake overcame these obstacles. His return to England in 1580, with treasure and glory, marked the beginning of England's rise as a naval power. But it was not just explorers like Drake who were reshaping England's place in the world. Merchants and traders also played a critical role in expanding England's global influence. These men were not always as famous as the explorers, but their work was no less important. They ventured into unknown markets, forging relationships with distant rulers, and establishing trade routes that would shape the future of the English economy. Hackett dedicates considerable attention to these unsung heroes, merchants who traveled far and wide in search of valuable goods and new markets. They braved hostile territories, harsh climates, and uncertain political situations to bring back wealth that helped fuel England's expansion. One of the most notable examples is the English merchants who ventured into the vast expanse of Russia and Persia. These men faced long, grueling journeys through deserts, mountains, and treacherous landscapes, all in the name of expanding England's trade network. The English presence in Russia and Persia was a result of the efforts of men like Anthony Jenkinson and Richard Chancellor, whose work paved the way for the establishment of the Muscovy Company in the 1550s. These early traders were not only seeking goods like furs and spices, but also trying to build alliances with powerful foreign rulers. Their efforts were instrumental in opening up new avenues for English trade, and their legacy is seen in the connections they forged with distant nations. In Hackett's account, the stories of these traders are woven together with those of the explorers, painting a picture of a nation that was determined to expand its reach and influence. It was a time of great risk and great reward, as England's explorers and merchants worked together to create a global network that would rival any other empire in the world. Hackett's narratives also delve into the fascinating encounters that occurred between the English and foreign peoples. As England's explorers and traders traveled the world, they came into contact with new cultures and civilizations, some friendly, others hostile. These interactions were not always easy, and many encounters led to tension or conflict. However, there were also moments of cooperation and mutual benefit. One of the most important regions for these interactions was the Americas, where English explorers and traders made their mark. The exploration of the New World was filled with both peril and promise, and Hackett's work provides a vivid picture of the early English attempts to settle in these vast, uncharted lands. These expeditions were fraught with challenges, from navigating through dense forests to surviving harsh winters. Yet, despite these obstacles, the English settlers pressed on, determined to establish a foothold in the final chapter of Richard Hackett's account of the English nation's navigations and discoveries brings us to the culmination of centuries of maritime exploration, trade expansion, and the consolidation of power across the world. The English, once a kingdom surrounded by tumultuous seas and warring factions, had evolved into a global empire. This chapter reflects the end of an era of exploration and the beginning of a new one that would see the English dominate trade, politics, and military might globally. Hackett's stories provide a vivid portrayal of how English exploration and its corresponding trade missions gradually led to the establishment of colonies and trade routes. With England's increasing presence in the Americas, Africa, and Asia, The flow of resources and goods back to the crown signified not just the expansion of wealth, but the rise of a nation at the forefront of global commerce. The narratives of shipwrecks, pirates, and storms continued to shape these stories, yet it was the forging of alliances and economic control that redefined England's position in the world. As the English began to realize the immense potential of establishing colonies for agriculture and trade, we witnessed their strategic shifts. Plantations became central to the growing English economy, particularly in the Caribbean and American South, where crops like tobacco and sugar were cultivated. These cash crops became highly valuable on the global market and bolstered England's economic power. The success of these colonies, however, was reliant on the labor of enslaved people, a dark reality of the colonial enterprise. The Atlantic slave trade fueled much of this labor, leading to a complicated legacy of exploitation alongside prosperity. The English Navy, once a fleet known primarily for exploration, became an essential component of the country's military strategy. The fleet not only defended England's shores, but also protected the expanding empire's commercial routes. English ships dominated the seas, securing vital routes across the Atlantic, the Mediterranean, and even the Far East. The Royal Navy had become a symbol of English power, with its fleet battling rivals like Spain and the Netherlands for control of critical maritime lanes. Hackett's portrayal of these naval battles shows how crucial the English fleet was to securing England's commercial interests abroad. The battles between English and Spanish ships, in particular, are described as moments that define the English ability to control crucial maritime lanes and project their power across the oceans. The defeat of the Spanish Armada in 1588 had already established England's naval supremacy, but it was the continuous efforts to protect trade routes that secured its dominance. However, Hackett also highlights the diplomatic side of English expansion. As England built its empire, it realized the importance of forging political alliances with other nations. For example, the Treaty of London in 1604 ended the Anglo-Spanish War and allowed for an opening of trade between the two nations. This diplomatic shift helped stabilize England's position in Europe, while simultaneously increasing its trade footprint in both the Mediterranean and the Americas. Hackett brings attention to the English East India Company, a critical player in England's expansion into Asia. The company not only created profitable trade routes for goods such as spices, textiles, and tea, but also established military presence in strategic areas. The East India Company's military and economic influence would go on to shape the geopolitics of the region for centuries. Its successes set the foundation for English dominance in South Asia, leading to the eventual establishment of British India. Yet, while the East India Company flourished, Hackett's account also reflects the costs of empire building. Colonization and the quest for resources brought not only new opportunities for the English, but also violence, oppression, and exploitation. Native peoples were displaced, and their land was taken for resources and profit. The English settlers and explorers often did not acknowledge the humanity of indigenous populations, resulting in countless acts of injustice and violence. The legacy of these actions is felt throughout the subsequent centuries, as the colonies grew into politically and economically important territories. England's empire would go on to shape world history, yet the roots of its power were marred by the injustices and conflicts that arose from colonization. As Hackett's stories show, England's rise was not just the result of military conquests or economic ventures. It was also about the accumulation of global influence. The empire was fueled by both diplomacy and war, by trade and industry. English explorers, merchants, and military leaders set the stage for a global system that transformed world politics, economics, and culture. By the end of the 16th century, England was no longer a small, isolated island. It had become a dominant force in international trade, politics, and military affairs. The successes of the English Navy, the expansion of colonial territories, and the increasing wealth generated from global trade culminated in the consolidation of the English Empire. By the close of the 16th century, the groundwork had been laid for England to become the world's leading colonial power in the centuries to follow. The results of these explorations shaped not only England, but also the entire world, from the Americas to Asia. Through Hackett's writings, we gain insight into how exploration, colonization, and trade formed the backbone of England's global empire. The stories of brave sailors and ambitious merchants continue to resonate today, as they remind us of the far-reaching effects of England's historical journey. Yet, these tales also ask us to consider the complex legacies of such expansion, the interplay of power, trade, culture, and conflict, and their lasting effects on the world. In the end, Hackett's work serves as both a celebration of English achievement and a reminder of the costs that come with empire building. It is a reminder that the rise of England and the foundations of its global empire was not built solely on the backs of explorers and merchants. It was also shaped by the blood, sweat, and suffering of countless individuals whose stories were often left untold. By the end of the 16th century, England had successfully established itself as a maritime superpower. The years of exploration and trade had turned the English nation into an empire that would go on to influence world history in profound ways. The challenges faced, the battles fought, and the ambitions pursued would lay the foundation for England's place in the centuries to come.